The heavy oak doors of Jackson County Family Court creaked open at exactly 9:02 a.m., letting in a trickle of warm July air. Inside, the courtroom remained still, the buzz of conversation dying quickly as people settled into wooden benches worn smooth by years of tense hearings. The air was thick, not just with the Missouri summer heat, but with something else. Anticipation? Anxiety? Maybe both. At the center of it all sat Maya Thompson, just 8 years old. Small for her age, Maya looked like she belonged in a second grade classroom, not a courtroom filled with prosecutors, defense attorneys, and reporters scribbling into yellow notepads. Her hair was pulled into 2 tight braids, and she clutched a faded stuffed bear in her lap. A judge had allowed it, saying she was a special witness. To Maya, the courtroom was enormous. The ceiling felt like it went up forever. Her legs swung nervously from the tall witness chair, her sneakers bumping the polished wood rhythmically. The microphones loomed in front of her like robots from one of her cartoons, cold and unfamiliar. Her mom sat just a few feet away, offering a reassuring smile through teary eyes. Judge Alana Reyes, known for her sharp eyes and unwavering demeanor, adjusted her glasses and looked toward Maya. "Sweetheart, I just want you to tell the truth. Do you remember what happened that night with your daddy?" Maya nodded slowly, fingers tightening around her bear. The courtroom leaned in, almost collectively holding its breath. He was outside, yelling, not at anybody, just loud. Her voice was soft, like a whisper wrapped in fear. And then, the police came. The prosecutor stepped forward carefully, his tone gentle. "Do you remember what happened when the officers got there, Maya?" Another small nod. "They told him to get down. He did. But then the dog came." Now there was movement, subtle, but real. Eyes darted around. A few reporters exchanged glances. "This wasn't in the preliminary report. Can you tell us more about the dog?" The prosecutor asked, lowering his voice further. Maya's eyes slowly drifted to the left, to the side of the courtroom where Officer Daniel Myers sat, his expression unreadable. Beside him lay Ranger, the department's prized K-9 unit. Ranger, a large, black and tan German shepherd with eyes like polished obsidian, lay calmly, his ears twitching occasionally, but otherwise silent and obedient. Maya's gaze locked on the dog. She raised her hand, small, trembling, and pointed. Straight at him. "That's the dog," she said, her voice louder now, suddenly confident. "He bit my daddy. A lot. Even when he wasn't moving anymore." The room exploded in stunned murmurs. Judge Reyes slammed her gavel once. Order in the courtroom. But the damage was done. The child's words had cracked open a door no one had anticipated. On the defense bench, Officer Myers shifted in his seat. His face remained composed, but his hands curled slowly into fists. He hadn't expected this. No one had. The K-9 unit was rarely questioned. They were seen as extensions of the officer, not capable of personal malice or misjudgment. But now the dog, his dog, was at the center of a story that didn't match his report. Ranger stayed perfectly still, calm, loyal, trained. But for Maya, the dog wasn't just a tool of the police. He was the monster that haunted her dreams. She continued, more animated now. He already had his hands behind his back. He was bleeding. The dog wouldn't stop. Her voice cracked on the last word. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't stop. I was screaming. Mommy was screaming too. Nobody helped, just the dog. The prosecutor stood frozen. This wasn't rehearsed. This wasn't coached. Maya's testimony was raw, unfiltered, and cutting straight to the heart of the case. Her truth came not with legal jargon or prepared statements, but with wide eyes and a trembling voice, and it landed like a punch in the gut. Officer Myers' attorney rose quickly. "Your Honor, objection." This child is clearly traumatized and unqualified to make an assessment of the police procedure. We request that this line of questioning cease unless verified with evidence." But Judge Reyes held up a hand. She's stating what she saw. Continue. Outside, a crowd had started to gather. A local reporter who'd been tipped off that this trial might turn interesting was now furiously texting her editor. In a matter of hours, Maya's moment would become the headline. Young girl points at police dog in courtroom. Shocking testimony appends trial. Back inside, the prosecutor took a moment, visibly recalibrating his entire approach. Maya, did anyone tell the dog to stop? She wiped her nose and whispered, "No. He only stopped when the other man yelled really loud and pulled him back." Judge Reyes looked down at the police report on her bench. Nowhere did it mention continued force. Nowhere did it mention dog. Nowhere did it mention Maya. A ripple of doubt passed through the room. What else was missing? The defense attorney requested a break. The judge granted it because the courtroom emptied slowly. Whispers filled the air. She pointed at the dog. "Did you see her face?" She knew. That girl knew exactly what she saw. Maya sat still, hugging her bear. Her mother crouched beside her and whispered something into her ear. The girl nodded, her face calm again. Reporters were already lining up outside the courthouse. Photographers snapped shots of the girl exiting hand in hand with her mother. The image of her, small, solemn, and brave, would hit front pages by morning. But inside those courtroom walls, a door had been opened. What was once just another excessive force case had become something far more complicated. Because when a child points not at a man, but at a dog, a symbol of order, obedience, and authority, and says, "That's who hurt my daddy," the entire system begins to tremble. And this was just the beginning. The break in court lasted only 15 minutes, but it was enough time for the courthouse to feel entirely different. The courtroom, once merely somber and procedural, now buzzed with an energy that felt electric, unstable, dangerous. The kind that crackles right before a thunderstorm. By the time everyone returned to their seats, Maya's simple words had already begun to echo beyond the courthouse walls. "That's the dog. He bit my daddy." A sentence so plain, so honest, that no lawyer in the room knew exactly what to do with it. The prosecution's lead attorney, Rachel Lynn, sat at her desk, eyes narrowed at the slim folder in her hands. She had read the original police report a dozen times. No mention of the dog being deployed after the suspect was subdued. No mention of a child being present. Ranger, the department's prized K-9, was referred to only once as part of the team. Nothing more, but Maya's story was too vivid to dismiss. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't asked for help finding the words. She had seen something, and she remembered it clearly. Still, the defense clung to doubt like a life raft. As court resumed, Officer Daniel Meyer's attorney, Leonard Pratt, stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor," he began, "I must reiterate our objection to the emotional weight being placed on testimony that, while clearly heartfelt, comes from a child who may not understand what she saw. With all due respect to the witness, children, particularly under trauma, often misinterpret events." Judge Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Are you implying the child lied, Mr. Pratt?" He hesitated. "No, Your Honor. Only that what she remembers might not be factually accurate or legally reliable. She identified your client's K-9 by sight. In a room full of people and distractions," Judge Reyes said, voice cool. "That carries weight, regardless of her age." In the jury box, 12 men and women shifted uncomfortably. Rachel Lynn stood next. "If the defense is arguing the unreliability of memory, I would like to remind the court that no one, not one officer, included Maya Thompson in their report that night. Not her presence. Not her trauma. Not the fact that a child witnessed her father being subdued. A murmur rolled through the room. It was true. Not a single mention. Leonard Pratt looked visibly uneasy now. That's a procedural oversight, not evidence of misconduct. Rachel's voice sharpened. It's the kind of oversight that lets abuse hide in plain sight. Suddenly, the tone of the trial shifted. It was no longer about one man's arrest, or even about police procedure. It was about who gets to be believed in America. A frightened child, or a trained officer with a badge and a service dog. Maya was taken out of the courtroom after her testimony. Her part, at least officially, done for the day, but her presence lingered. Every statement made now had to compete with the image of a little girl pointing at a police dog and saying it bit her father while he lay still. And then there was Ranger. Even among the seasoned journalists in the press bench, no one could remember a moment quite like this, where a dog, not a human, had been so directly accused in a courtroom. Ranger wasn't just any dog. He had served in the department for 6 years, credited with over 24 successful apprehensions. His handler, Officer Myers, was one of the best in the unit. Decorated, respected. He had given interviews to local news outlets before. He and Ranger had been used in recruitment videos, and now that same dog sat motionless, tongue lolling slightly, unaware he had become the center of a moral and legal firestorm. Rachel, Ling requested that Ranger's deployment records be entered into evidence. Judge Reyes allowed it. They showed something interesting. In the last year, Ranger had been deployed 5 times, all 5 against black suspects. None of the suspects had been armed. 2 had required hospitalization. That detail hung in the air like fog. Rachel spoke carefully, methodically. Your Honor, while dogs do not act maliciously, they act according to training. Officer Myers commands the dog. And yet, on the night in question, there was no audio footage of the release command. The body camera is inconclusive, partially obstructed by movement. All we know for sure is that a man was taken down, and the dog continued to apply force after the suspect was motionless. If the child is telling the truth, and I believe she is, that's not policing. That's punishment. The courtroom was dead silent. From the public seating, someone whispered, "They're not going to get away with it this time." That was the moment the temperature in the room fully dropped. Everyone realized something monumental was happening. This wasn't a trial anymore. It was an inflection point. In the hallways outside, word of the trial spread quickly. A civil rights group from Kansas City showed up an hour later, handing out flyers about canine overuse in minority communities. A woman held a sign that read, "Believe her." And still, at the heart of it all, was that little girl, Maya, who had said one sentence that shook everything. Inside the courtroom, Officer Myers was finally called to the stand. The prosecutor approached carefully. "Officer Myers, on the night of July 7th, when you deployed Ranger, had the suspect already surrendered?" Myers replied flatly, "He was non-compliant." Define non-compliant. He refused to lie down. He was shouting. Was he armed? No. Did you warn him a canine would be released? Yes. Did he respond? Yes. What did he say? Myers paused. He said, "I'm not moving." "I didn't do anything." The prosecutor nodded. So, in response to a verbal protest from an unarmed man with his daughter, watching, you released a dog trained to bite and hold? Myers remained silent for a beat too long. He resisted arrest. "Officer, was the suspect moving when Ranger bit him?" "I can't say for sure." "But an 8-year-old girl did?" That line landed hard. As court adjourned for the day, reporters scrambled outside to deliver the update to waiting cameras. The story was no longer just about the use of force. It had become about accountability, about credibility, about the dangerous gray area between law and trauma, especially when viewed through the eyes of a child. Maya Thompson had only spoken a few sentences, but her truth had pierced through uniforms, training manuals, and sworn reports. And now, the system had no choice but to respond. And for the first time in years, Officer Daniel Myers looked unsure of himself. Because it wasn't the lawyers, or the media, or even the judge he had to answer to. It was the little girl with the braids, and her truth. By the next morning, Clayton, Missouri, was no longer just a sleepy suburb west of St. Louis. It had become the epicenter of a nationwide debate. Local news vans crowded the narrow courthouse street, satellite dishes spinning like watchful eyes. Protesters had begun to gather early, their voices growing louder with each new headline. Girl identifies police dog in brutality trial. Canine unit under fire after child testifies. Justice through a child's eyes. What started as a relatively quiet trial about a man resisting arrest had now become a collision between innocence, authority, and the uncomfortable truths America often avoids. The Thompson family had stayed in a shelter overnight, escorted quietly by victim advocates after the courtroom emptied. Angela Thompson, Maya's mother, hadn't spoken publicly, not yet. But cameras still followed her every step, snapping pictures of the tired woman, clutching her daughter's hand like a lifeline. The city felt divided. On one side were supporters of the police, people who believed Officer Myers had simply followed protocol. If the guy didn't resist, the dog wouldn't have been released. One man said on the news, waving an American flag as a backdrop to his words. On the other side were people like Marissa Green, a retired school teacher who now led the St. Louis Justice Coalition, holding a handmade sign that read, "Even a child can see the truth." She stood firmly outside the courthouse steps. "I've been watching trials in this courthouse for 40 years, she told a local station. And I've never seen one little girl change everything the way Maya did. Inside the courtroom, Rachel Lynn was already preparing her next move. She wasn't just trying a case anymore. She was building a reckoning. The city's police department had long prided itself on its elite canine unit. But no one had truly questioned how often those dogs were deployed, and who they were deployed against. Rachel's assistant handed her a freshly printed dossier, complaint records, civilian injuries, and internal affairs reports. Hidden inside the bland legal language were moments of pain. People bitten, arrested, silenced. In almost every case, the suspect was unarmed. And overwhelmingly, they were black. Back in the hallway, Officer Daniel Myers sat on a bench, staring at the floor. His uniform was perfectly pressed, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent light, but his confidence was slipping. The questions haunted him now. Had he waited long enough before releasing Ranger? Had the suspect really been resisting? Had the girl truly seen everything she said she had? He rubbed his temples, his head spinning. Ranger, lying beside him on the floor, remained calm as always, his breathing steady, his loyalty unbroken. Just doing his job, Myers whispered, more to himself than anyone else. But somewhere inside, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing. That afternoon, court resumed. This time, the prosecution called Dr. Julian Ferris, an independent forensic expert who had reviewed the body cam footage and examined the medical records of Terrence Thompson. Maya's father. Dr. Ferris took the stand with an air of clinical authority. His voice even, his words meticulous. In reviewing the lacerations and puncture wounds on Mr. Thompson's legs and arms, it is evident that the dog maintained a grip well beyond the standard 3-second bite and release protocol, defined by K9 training guidelines. The courtroom leaned in. These wounds suggest the dog continued to apply pressure even after the subject was subdued. That duration indicates the absence of a release command, or the failure of the dog to respond to. One. Gasps, murmurs. Leonard Pratt, The defense attorney stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Judge Reyes raised an eyebrow. He's testifying to his expert analysis. Overruled. Rachel Lynn approached with purpose. Dr. Ferris, in your experience, what happens if a handler hesitates in issuing a command to release? The dog continues to bite. Dogs are obedient creatures. They respond to training and command. But if neither is given, they act on instinct and muscle memory. It's not the dog's fault. It's the handler's responsibility. That line hit Officer Myers like a hammer. The jury looked at him, just briefly. But the damage was done. That evening, the courthouse let out under the golden haze of sunset, but the noise outside hadn't faded. More protesters had arrived. Someone had brought candles. Others chanted Maya's name like a prayer. Justice for Maya's dad. But not everyone supported her. The local police union held a press conference just a few blocks away. Officer Myers, flanked by fellow officers in crisp uniforms, remained silent as Union President Mark Halverston read from a prepared statement. Our officers risk their lives daily. Officer Myers followed protocol. Ranger is a highly decorated K-9. The smear campaign against this department, led by emotional manipulation and media spin, is disgraceful. One reporter shouted, "What about the girl's testimony?" Halverston didn't flinch. We don't build cases on bedtime stories. The backlash was immediate. By nightfall, #BelieveMaya was trending on Twitter. Celebrities began weighing in. A popular black actor tweeted, "When a child tells you she saw injustice, believe her. Especially when her voice is the only one they tried to erase." Inside the Thompson shelter room, Angela read the tweet aloud to Maya. The little girl, curled up under a worn blanket, barely nodded. She was tired. Her eyes heavy. "Did I do something wrong?" she whispered. Angela's voice cracked. "No, baby. You told the truth. And the truth scares people." Maya pulled her teddy bear closer. "I just want Daddy to come home." Angela stroked her daughter's braid. "Me too." Meanwhile, Rachel Lynn stayed up late at her office, poring over reports. Her legal team was now compiling over a decade of K-9 deployment stats. A pattern was emerging. A pattern no one had wanted to see until a little girl forced them to. And Officer Myers? He sat alone in his patrol car, parked on a dark street corner, Ranger sitting silently beside him. For the first time in years, Myers didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a man caught between orders and consequences. He stared at his reflection in the side mirror. He didn't know it yet, but by the time this trial ended, he wouldn't just be defending a decision. He'd be defending an entire system, and what it allowed him to do without question. And Maya? Her voice, small and trembling, had broken the silence, and now there was no turning back. The courtroom was colder than usual the next morning, but not because of the air conditioning. The tension inside was sharp, thin, and metallic, like a wire pulled too tight. Everyone could feel it. Eyes darted to the defense table, where Officer Daniel Myers sat stone still, staring at the polished wood before him. The man who once smiled for community, outreach posters, who once shook hands with schoolchildren and waved proudly from parades, now sat like a ghost of himself. Even his posture had changed. Across the aisle, Rachel Lynn quietly organized her notes. She knew the next move mattered more than anything that came before. It was time to break through the uniform. Not to smear Myers, but to unmask the system that protected him, and the silence it demanded. She called her next witness. Henry Crawford, Myers' former supervisor and once a close friend. Crawford walked to the stand with steady steps. The man was a career officer, his graying temples and precise diction giving him an air of integrity. He had trained dozens of K-9 handlers in his 30-year tenure, including Myers' as he took the oath All eyes were on him. Especially Myers, Lieutenant. Rachel began. You've worked with Officer Myers for over a decade. Would you describe him as competent? Yes, Crawford replied. He's sharp, focused, always followed training. Did you ever have reason to question his use of force in the field? Crawford shifted. Not officially, but there were concerns raised, quietly. What kind of concerns? Crawford hesitated. Let's just say, he was known for escalation. Some thought he was too quick to rely on Ranger, too quick to treat resistance as threat. The room stirred. Rachel leaned forward. Lieutenant, were those concerns ever documented? No. We talked informally. But the culture, it discouraged filing formal complaints unless something went catastrophically wrong. And when things did go wrong, they were buried under paperwork, Crawford said quietly, or justified by policy. A pause. Rachel nodded solemnly. So the truth depended on who wrote the report. In many ways, Crawford said yes. For the first time, Myers' jaw tightened. His stare toward his former mentor hardened. The betrayal stung deeper than he expected. Crawford wasn't finished. He glanced toward the jury. The badge teaches you loyalty to your team, your department, but it rarely teaches you accountability. That's the part we're all still learning. The silence after that statement was heavy, the kind of silence that settles when uncomfortable truths enter the room. As Rachel sat down, Officer Myers' defense lawyer, Leonard Pratt, rose. He looked visibly rattled, his arguments sliding thin over the ice forming beneath them. Lieutenant Crawford, he began, you mentioned informal concerns. Isn't it true those were based on opinion, not fact? True, Crawford replied. But sometimes patterns are clearer than reports. Is it also true that Officer Myers received multiple commendations for bravery? Yes. So, would you say he acted with malice? No. I'd say he acted within a system that blurs the line between authority and abuse. It was the most honest answer he could give. The kind that leaves an echo. Outside the courtroom, news coverage intensified. National outlets were now sending reporters. Headlines screamed across cable tickers. Pundits debated Maya's testimony, police responsibility, and the trustworthiness of K-9 units in emotionally charged segments. One viral clip showed an anchor asking, when an 8-year-old remembers what body cams don't, who do we believe? That night, body cam footage of the arrest leaked to the public. Though partially obscured, the footage showed a chaotic scene. Flashing lights, yelling, the brief glimpse of Terrence Thompson kneeling, his hands visible. The dog's bark was sharp and urgent, followed by screams. What gripped viewers most wasn't the bite. It was the moment after, when the screaming stopped, and Maya's voice rang out in the distance. Daddy? Daddy, get up. The video was real. The pain was real. And America couldn't look away. Social media exploded. The hashtag Justice for Maya surged to the top of trending charts. Protesters grew in number. Celebrities, authors, activists. Even clergy joined in. The mayor issued a statement calling for a thorough review of police protocol and officer conduct. But in the courtroom, Officer Myers faced something more personal, himself. The next day, he took the stand. His defense had no choice. With the narrative turning against them, Myers had to speak, not just to protect his job, but to reclaim his identity. Dressed in a plain suit, no uniform or badge this time, he looked older. Human. Rachel stood up slowly. Her voice was measured. Officer Myers, do you believe Maya Thompson lied? No, he said after a pause. I believe she saw what she believed was true. But was it true? Rachel asked. Myers exhaled. I released the dog. That part is true. Why? I felt threatened. Thompson was yelling, not complying. Was he armed? No. Did he raise a hand toward you? No. Did He run? No. Then what exactly threatened you? Myers' throat tightened. His words dried. It's the intensity. The way things feel in the moment. When adrenaline takes over. So, Rachel said carefully, you released a trained attack dog based on a feeling? Silence. That's what it comes down to, Rachel continued. You felt fear, and your fear outweighed his rights. Outweighed Maya's safety. I didn't see the child, Myers whispered. I swear I didn't know she was there. And if you had? I don't know. He admitted. I'd like to believe I would have made a different call. Tears welled in his eyes. And for the first time, the courtroom saw not a villain, but a man unraveling under the weight of choices. Rachel closed her notebook. She had done enough. The jury saw what they needed to. When the judge called recess, a storm of flashbulbs erupted outside. Maya and her mother were already gone, quietly escorted from a side exit. They didn't need the noise. They had already said what mattered. But inside the courthouse, something had shifted permanently. No badge could shield Myers from what was coming. No training manual could explain away what Maya had seen. And no amount of silence could cover. A growing call for justice, because now the world had heard her voice, and it would not forget. It was a crisp Friday morning, and the courthouse steps were no longer just stone, they were a stage. A crowd had gathered, hundreds deep now. TV anchors stood in front of cameras rehearsing their lines, while photographers snapped shots of handmade signs. Maya speaks for us all. No more silence. A badge doesn't excuse a bite. Maya Thompson's name was now known far beyond Missouri. From classrooms to courtrooms, her quiet bravery had become a lightning rod for debates about race, police power, and the innocence of children in a world built on adult mistakes. But Maya wasn't watching the coverage. She was curled up in a hotel room miles from the courthouse, a fuzzy blanket wrapped around her, a bowl of cereal half-eaten in front of her. Her mother, Angela, sat silently nearby, her hand resting gently on Maya's knee. Do I have to go? Back? Maya asked softly. Angela shook her head. Not today, baby. Maya nodded. Okay, good. A pause. I miss Daddy. Angela swallowed hard. Me too. At the courthouse, closing arguments were about to begin. The jury had heard everything. The bite wounds, the internal reports, the leaked footage, and perhaps most importantly, Maya's raw, unforgettable testimony. But now it was time to tie it all together. Leonard Pratt, Officer Myers' attorney, stepped up first. He was calm, practiced. His tie was perfectly straight, his voice firm. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began. This case isn't about emotion. It's not about headlines or hashtags or how you feel about law enforcement. It's about facts. He walked slowly across the courtroom, gesturing to Officer Myers. My client did what he was trained to do. He made a split-second decision under pressure. Was it tragic? Yes, but it wasn't criminal. He pointed toward the evidence table. You heard testimony that the suspect was yelling, not complying. You heard that Officer Myers had seconds to react. The law allows for discretion in these situations. This wasn't malice. It was a judgment call. Then, with a final glance at the jury, he said, Don't let a viral moment overshadow decades of service. He sat down, and for a moment, there was quiet. Then Rachel Lynn stood. No theatrics. No anger. Just a woman with truth on her side. Split second. Decisions, she echoed, are not a blank check for violence. She walked slowly, letting her words sink in. Yes, policing is hard. Yes, the job comes with risk. But when that risk is transferred onto unarmed civilians, when children are traumatized, when truth is ignored, it's our duty to act. She paused at the center of the room. Maya Thompson, she said softly, didn't know about police protocol. She didn't study training manuals. She just saw what happened. And sometimes, that's all we need. Rachel turned toward the jury, her eyes unwavering. We are here because an officer used force where none was needed. Because a father was mauled while on the ground. Because a little girl cried for help and no one listened until now. Then, she pointed to a photo projected behind her, a still frame from the body cam footage. Terrence Thompson, on the ground. Ranger on top. In the background, Maya's small silhouette, frozen in panic. This is what happens when fear is weaponized. Rachel said, "Don't look away. Don't make her invisible again." She sat down. And the courtroom fell into one of the longest silences yet. The jury retired to deliberate. Hours passed. Outside, the protests remained peaceful but loud. Drums echoed through the plaza. Flowers lined the courthouse steps. Children marched alongside their parents, holding signs Maya would never fully understand, but had inspired nonetheless. Inside the jury room, the discussions were heated. Some jurors felt Myers had done his duty. Others saw a clear pattern of excessive force. They debated policy, intent, and accountability. But one juror, a middle-aged nurse named Darlene Porter, brought the group back to what mattered. "Imagine that was your daughter," she said softly, and she saw what Maya saw. "Wouldn't you want someone to believe her?" By nightfall, word spread. A verdict had been reached. The crowd outside grew. Reporters adjusted their lights. Police lined the perimeter, not in riot gear, just watching, uncertain what might happen next. Back in the courtroom, the judge returned. The jury entered. Officer Myers stood, hands clasped in front of him, his face pale and unreadable. Rachel placed a hand on Angela Thompson's shoulder. Angela held her breath. The foreman rose. In the matter of Officer Daniel Myers, on the charge of excessive force resulting in bodily harm. A pause. We find the defendant guilty. The room erupted. Gasps, cries, cheers from outside filtered through the walls. Myers closed his eyes, not in anger, but exhaustion. A quiet nod, as if he knew, deep down, this day had always been coming. Angela burst into tears. Rachel held her as cameras flashed. But Maya? She was still in the hotel room, playing with a doll. When Angela got the call, she rushed to her daughter, knelt down, and whispered the news. "They believed you, sweetie. They believed you." Maya blinked. "So Daddy can come home now?" "Soon," Angela said, her voice trembling. "Very soon." In the days that followed, the verdict made national headlines. Federal investigations were opened into K-9 training procedures. Proposals were introduced to limit their use on unarmed suspects. The mayor of Clayton announced a complete review of police tactics. Several officers resigned. The Justice Department made a statement citing Maya's testimony as a pivotal moment in community police accountability. And the little girl at the center of it all? She returned to school quietly the next week, holding a new backpack and an old teddy bear. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She just wanted her dad, her bed, and maybe one night where she didn't dream of barking dogs. But whether she knew it or not, Maya had changed the world around her. One voice, one truth, one child who pointed and said, "That's the one." And everything followed. The sun rose differently over Clayton, Missouri, the morning after the verdict. It was subtle, a soft gold breaking through gray clouds, but for many, it felt like the town had exhaled after holding its breath far too long. Outside the courthouse, the signs were gone, the news vans rolled away, but something invisible lingered. A quiet shift in how people looked at each other. More alert, more cautious, but also more awake. Officer Daniel Myers had been taken into custody immediately after the verdict. No handcuffs, no scene, just a slow walk out a back door, under the watchful eyes of federal marshals. He didn't fight it. There were no words left to argue. In his cell that night, he stared at the concrete wall as the ceiling light buzzed overhead. He thought about Ranger, the dog now transferred to a new handler pending retraining. The bond they'd had, the pride, the sense of certainty he once carried while patrolling the streets. Now, that confidence was replaced by questions that wouldn't stop coming. What if he had waited 5 more seconds? What if he had listened, really listened, instead of reacting? What if Maya had been one step closer? He hadn't just lost his badge. He'd lost the man he believed himself to be. Meanwhile, Rachel Lynn sat at her desk well past midnight, reviewing files for another case. Her victory had made headlines, sure, but justice, she knew, was a fragile thing. One case didn't change a system, but it could crack it. She had received thousands of emails from teachers, parents, lawyers, even cops. Some sent thanks, some sent hate. Most sent stories of their own, near misses, buried trauma, children who never got to speak up like Maya had. Rachel responded to as many as she could, but the one that made her pause came from an address in Alabama. A mother wrote, "My son was bitten by a canine last year. They said he lunged at the officer, but I was right there. I saw what happened. When Maya said what she saw, I believed her. Now I believe people might finally believe me too." That, Rachel thought, was why it mattered. As for Angela Thompson, she barely slept that first night. Her body was exhausted, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. The weight of months, trials, cameras, late-night phone calls with lawyers, holding Maya through panic attacks, it all came crashing. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering Terrence's last words before the bite. He'd yelled, "I'm not resisting." But no one listened. She kept hearing it over and over. That morning, a phone rang. It was a collect call. From the county jail. Angela answered on the third ring. Her voice cracked. "Terrence?" "Hey, baby," he said. "I heard. They told." Silence. "I still can't believe it," he added softly. "They actually believed us." "They believed Maya," Angela said, wiping her eyes. "She carried us through." "I want to talk to her," he said. Angela looked over. Maya was curled up on the couch, drawing with markers, headphones in. "I'll let her know," she said. "She want to." When Maya finally picked up the phone, her eyes lit up. "Daddy? Hey, sweet pea." "I told them," she whispered. "I told them what happened. I know you did. And I'm proud of you." A long pause. "Can you come home now?" she asked. Terrence's voice caught. "Not yet, but soon, baby. Real soon." Outside their apartment, the street had become a quiet memorial. Neighbors left flowers. Strangers dropped off books, stuffed animals, gift cards. One woman taped a note to the door. "Your daughter changed the conversation. Thank you for raising her right." But Angela knew it hadn't just been her. Maya had always been different. Observant, kind, brave in the softest way. It wasn't parenting. It was Maya's heart. And now the world saw it too. Across the country, the impact of the trial echoed. City councils in over a dozen states proposed bills limiting the use of police dogs in arrests involving unarmed suspects. Federal review boards began compiling statistics on canine-related injuries for the first time in years. A senator even mentioned Maya's name on the Senate floor, calling her the voice of a generation too long ignored. Police departments held internal briefings. Retraining programs were rolled out. Several officers quietly stepped down. But not everyone was happy. Some unions pushed back. Conservative commentators called the verdict a war on police. Online trolls flooded the Thompson family's social media with hateful messages. And still, the truth held. Because it was on video. Because it was in Maya's words. Because once a child tells you something simple and devastating, you don't unhear it. In the weeks that followed, a children's book publisher approached Angela. They wanted to create a book inspired by Maya's story about telling the truth, even when it's scary. Maya would get to help write it. Angela hesitated at first. The idea of reliving it, even in fiction, felt heavy. But when she asked Maya if she wanted to do it, the little girl nodded. If other kids get scared, she said, they should know. They can say something. The book was called Maya Saw It and became an instant bestseller in classrooms. By the time Terrence was released, his charges dropped quietly by the state in light of the verdict. Maya met him at the gates. In a purple hoodie and butterfly clips in her hair. She didn't run to him. She walked, but when he knelt down and opened his arms, she fell into them like no time had passed. And maybe, in a way, time hadn't moved at all. Not until justice finally caught up. They went home, not as the broken family they once were, but as something stronger. A father, a mother, a daughter, bound by truth, tested by pain, and now part of something far larger than themselves. Because sometimes it takes a child to remind the world of what it should never have forgotten. The day Terrence Thompson walked back through the doors of their small apartment, the air smelled like pancakes and cinnamon. Angela had made a full breakfast, even though it was late afternoon. She said it didn't matter what time it was. When family comes home, we eat. Maya was waiting on the couch, nervously tugging at a frayed ribbon tied around her wrist. It was the same one Terrence had given her months ago at a carnival, just days before the arrest. She'd kept it, hidden in a drawer, like a tiny promise. He'd be back. When the door creaked open and Terrence stepped inside, Maya didn't speak at first. She just looked at him, really looked, as if to confirm it wasn't just a dream. Then she ran. "Daddy!" He caught her mid-air. She wrapped her arms around his neck, so tight he had to sit down, laughing through the tears. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "I missed you more," he said. Burying his face in her curls, Angela watched from the kitchen, eyes shining. For the first time in months, her husband was home. The man they tried to break, tried to silence. But here he was, holding their daughter like he never let go. They ate together that night, not talking much, just listening to the clatter of forks, the soft rhythm of being a family again. Every bite was a reminder that some parts of life were still warm, still normal. But outside their apartment, the world hadn't forgotten them. The local newspaper ran the headline, "Thompson Family Reunited. The girl who changed the system welcomes father home." TV crews parked near their street again. Neighbors waved awkwardly. Some strangers approached the front steps to leave gifts or ask for interviews. Everyone wanted something. A soundbite, a quote, a photo of the family who beat the badge. But Terrence wasn't ready to be a symbol. "I just want to be Terrence again," he told Angela one night. "Not a case, not a headline." She nodded. "Then we'll find quiet again, somehow." Still, it wasn't easy. Everywhere they went, people stared at Maya mostly. She was on posters, featured in news segments. At school, her classmates treated her differently. Some called her brave. Others didn't know what to say at all. One boy whispered that her dad had attacked a cop. Maya cried that night in her room. Angela sat beside her on the bed, brushing hair from her forehead. "You know what really happened. That's what matters." "But why are people still mean?" Maya asked, "even after the truth?" Angela sighed, "Because some people are scared of truth. But that doesn't make it any less true." Terrence tried to rejoin the workforce, but every job interview ended with awkward hesitations. Even with the charges dropped, his record still flagged background checks. Employers didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. You're too public. Too controversial. Too complicated. For weeks, he worked odd jobs, deliveries, day labor. Anything to stay moving. Eventually, a local black-owned bookstore offered him a position managing inventory. The owner, a former teacher named Mr. Clements, recognized him immediately. "You don't owe me a thing," Clements said. "But if you want to work here, I'd be proud to have you." Terrence shook his hand. "Thank you for seeing me as a man first." In time, the Thompsons settled into a new rhythm. Maya returned to therapy twice a week. Angela began journaling. Again, Terrence found peace in the quiet aisles of the bookstore, where paperbacks didn't judge and order forms didn't ask about his past. Then came the call that changed everything again. The Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture had heard about Maya's story. They wanted to feature it in a new exhibit called Voices of Justice. At first, Angela was hesitant. "We're still healing," she told them. But Maya, now 8, sat at the kitchen table coloring when she overheard the conversation. "Do I get to tell it in my words?" she asked. "Yes," Angela said slowly. "Only if you want to." Maya nodded. "Then I want to." Weeks later, the Thompsons traveled to Washington, D.C. They stood beneath towering murals and photos of Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X. And there, in a corner devoted to modern civil rights movements, was a display panel with a familiar photo, Maya, her small finger pointing at the police dog during the trial. Below the photo were the words, "Truth, from the smallest voice, can echo across a nation." Next to it was a quote from Maya herself, written in purple crayon. "I just said what I saw, and I was scared. But I wasn't lying." Tourists paused at the display. Some wiped tears. Parents read it aloud to their children. Students snapped photos. Maya stood silently in front of the exhibit for a long time. When she finally spoke, she looked up at her father. "Do you think people will forget?" Terrence shook his head. "Not anymore, baby." As the family walked away, hand in hand, Maya turned for one last look. She smiled, not because she was proud or famous or the girl who spoke up, but because she felt seen. And sometimes, being seen, really seen, is the beginning of healing. Years had passed since that fateful day in Clayton. The bitter memories hadn't fully faded, but the Thompsons had learned to live alongside them, not in defeat, but in resilience. Maya was no longer the frightened little girl clutching her mother's hand in the courtroom. She was now a bright, confident teenager who understood the weight of her words and the power of her truth. Every time she spoke, people listened, not because she sought attention, but because she had earned it through courage. At school, Maya led a student group called Voices for Justice, where young people shared stories about social change, civil rights, and community healing. She had become a role model, invited to speak at conferences, town halls, and even the state capitol. Terrence had rebuilt his life quietly but firmly. The bookstore job had grown into a community hub where poetry, readings, book clubs, and discussions about race and justice flourished. He had started mentoring young men who had been caught in the criminal justice system, helping them find paths forward instead of dead ends. Angela had finished her degree in social work and now worked at a local nonprofit, supporting families affected by police violence. She often told Maya, "Your voice saved your father's life, and now it's helping save others." The Thompson family had become a beacon of hope, proof that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. But their journey hadn't been easy. Every year, Maya would mark the date of the trial verdict quietly, a reminder of how fragile justice could be. Sometimes the nightmares returned, the barking, the chaos, the fear, but she learned to face them with the same bravery she showed in court. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Clayton, Maya sat on the porch with her parents. The air was warm and still, filled with the sounds of cicadas and distant laughter. "Do you ever wonder?" Maya asked softly. "What would have happened if I hadn't spoken up?" Terence looked at her, then reached out to hold her hand. "I don't want to think about that," he said. "But I do know this. Your voice changed everything. You made the world listen." Angela smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Maya's face. "And you remind us all that truth isn't always easy, but it's always worth telling." Maya leaned into her mother's shoulder. "I just hope nobody else has to be scared like I was. That's why we keep fighting," Angela said that the next day. News broke that Congress was moving closer to passing legislation regulating police use of K-9 units nationwide, the first of its kind. Advocates credited Maya's story for raising awareness, giving the bill momentum. At the signing ceremony, Maya was invited as a guest of honor. Standing on the stage, she looked out at the crowd, lawmakers, activists, reporters, and families who had come to witness change. She spoke with clear, steady words. "When I was 7 years old, I saw something no child should see. I was scared, but I spoke the truth. Because when we tell the truth, even if we're small, it can become a roar that no one can ignore. This law is not just about dogs or officers. It's about respect, safety, and the power of being heard." The applause was thunderous. Backstage, Terence and Angela hugged her tightly. "You did it, Maya," Terence whispered. "You changed the world." Maya smiled, but her thoughts drifted to the children still waiting to be heard. The ones afraid to speak, silenced by fear or doubt. Her journey wasn't over. Years later, Maya would write a memoir, not just about her story, but about the countless others who inspired her to keep fighting. The book became a staple in schools across the country, used to teach empathy, courage, and the importance of justice. Her family remained close, their bond forged in adversity and strengthened by love. And as Maya grew older, she never forgot the small voice inside her that pointed at the police dog that day, a voice that reminded everyone watching that sometimes the smallest truth has the biggest impact. Because in the end, justice isn't just about verdicts or laws. It's about listening, believing, and standing up no matter your age when it matters most. The story of Maya Thompson, her father, and the police dog that changed everything would be told for generations, a testament to courage, to healing, and to the enduring power of truth.